This is episode 134 of the Nursing Home Abuse Podcast. Do Georgia nursing homes conduct background checks on employees? The Nursing Home Abuse Podcast is dedicated to providing news and information for families whose loved ones have been injured in a nursing home. Here are your hosts, Georgia attorneys Rob Schenk and Will Smith. Hello out there. Hope you're having a spooky October. My name is Rob Schenk.
And I'm Will Smith.
And we are your hosts for this episode. I want to give a big, enormous shout out to Erica Scherner Fajeda, who is, and I'll have Jean, can we put her picture up here? She probably won't like that. We're going to put her picture up here. But Erica is my wife's younger sister and is Brazilian and still is able to speak English fluently. And has been instrumental in sending out the email invites and getting the information I need from the guests. Yeah. And so has made this particular production day possible and has made at least 15, 16, 17 episodes possible. So big, how do I say it? Bom dia? No, that means like good day. How would I say good job?
You're looking at. I'm not married to a Brazilian. Yeah. I don't know. I've met Erica
really
before, and she's great.
She's great.
She's a smart girl. Both of Daniela's sisters are.
Some would say she has 3 sisters.
Okay,
but
all 3 of his sisters are.
But well done. So thank you, Erica.
Thank you, Erica from America. Thank you.
Hey, that's pretty good. Thank you, Erica from America. Background checks in nursing homes. We're bringing this up at this time because earlier this month, on October 1st, the Georgia Long-Term Care Background Check Program took effect. Although the law was signed, although it was signed into law in 2018, in May of 2018, it takes effect now, and compliance starts in a few months in January in 2020. Mm-hmm. So we talked about this. If you want to go and look it up, we talked about this on the podcast. I believe about the time that it was enacted in May of 2018. I'll have to put up the episode number on that, but at any rate, so we'll be talking about that.
Yeah, and this is an interesting topic for a couple of reasons. That it also exposes what people don't really understand about arrest, about crimes, and about fingerprints. I was a criminal defense attorney in another life, and fingerprints are there's a sort of mystique in the public mind about what fingerprints are, and that they're the end-all be-all of identification, and they're not. First of all, one of the things that this new background legislation is addressing is the cracks in which you may find people with a criminal record. They fall through these cracks. Originally, Georgia was a name-only background check system.
And what does that mean?
So it means that if you were to run a background check for your employer, they would look up, for me, they would look up William Franklin Smith III. And, my date of birth and my exact name would be what they would use. The problem with that is very clear from the get-go, is that, even though the GCIC, which is the Georgia Crime Information Center, even though it should have up-to-date information about all of my aliases, which are Will, William, never Willie, but whatever, it's still not completely accurate. And now the GCIC is different than the NCIC. And the NCIC is the National Crime Information Center database. So anytime you get arrested and people talk about your record, this is what they're talking about. And the problem with your record is that there are a lot of offenses that are not fingerprintable. And some of those county ordinances, city ordinances, you may not get a fingerprint. And so you have to keep that in mind when you're looking at the whole picture. But what this law is intended to do is just just strengthen the net that we're throwing out there to try to catch people who work or have what the legislation says direct access to residents. And now it's going to include fingerprint. It's going to include looking at different databases. So not only are they going to run your GCIC or your NCIC, but they also look at the National Sexual Offender Registry. And sexual offenders are not the only criminals that they're trying to catch here. You got to think it's that anybody who has direct access to nursing home residents, you're looking at possible financial exploitation. So a facility that does a more thorough background may see that somebody has, they've written bad checks, or they've got other fraudulent activity that they've been arrested for. That's all important stuff. And what the hope is that by having now not just name, but also fingerprint, and also looking at the different databases, the GCIC plus the NCIC, that you're going to catch more people.
Yeah, you're casting a wider net.
You're casting a wider net, exactly.
And so the new law now, in terms of who is subject to the background check and the fingerprint check on the database, is owners of nursing homes, applicants for employment of nursing homes, employees currently providing care or owning a personal care home, assisted living community, private home care provider, home health agency, hospice care, nursing home, skilled nursing facility, or adult daycare. So not only are they expanding the actual background check, but they're expanding the categories of persons that are subject to it.
And this is important because it is not just, again, I have to stress this, it's not just sexual or physical crimes that they're concerned about. It's also financial exploitation. So it's really, especially when you're dealing with personal care homes, or smaller, ALFs, you've got somebody that has direct control over these individuals that are getting constant streams of money. So if you've got somebody that has, fraud or certain other financial crimes in their past, you don't want them in charge of individuals that are getting a constant stream of money from family or the government, right?
So whenever, and again, a lot of time, maybe this law will be different, but a lot of times I feel like the regulations and laws governing nursing homes don't have a lot of teeth.
Yeah.
However, the violations for violating, the penalties.
The fines for violating can be like $10,000?
Yeah, so penalties for violations can range from monetary penalties to license revocation. Failure to comply with the new law subjects the facility to liability for civil monetary penalties for $500 for each day that a violation occurs, up to $10,000.
Yeah. And you got to remember that these are all, and we did one a couple years back on the CMPs, the civil monetary penalties, and the whole landscape of that is just fraught with ways of getting out of it. You can appeal it. There's a whole process before they actually fine you, and not to mention a lot of times these regulations are just not enforced. So it's a good step in the right direction, but it's not going to be complete. It's also problematic because fingerprints are not the end all be all. There's a database called, it's something like IAFIS. It's the Integrated Automatic Fingerprint Information System. Very unimaginative acronyms that on this side of the aisle.
Correct.
GCIC, NCIC, IAFIS. But it's got some 70 million, I think I read, registrations in it. 70 million, sets of fingerprints, which sounds like a lot, but it's not. There's a lot of people that are missing there. You get a fingerprint anytime you buy a gun, you join the military, you join the police force, but you don't get fingerprinted every single time you get arrested. There's a lot of offenses out there that are ordinances or that are simply not put into the system. Like you'll have a lot of these. We would get whenever you have a criminal matter. The prosecution is going to give you your client's criminal background, their GCIC, and you would look at it, and a lot of times it would have misinformation on it. It would have other people's information on it, or it wouldn't have everything that you knew your client had been involved in. Mm-hmm. In some ways, it's kind of like how they tell you to always check your credit report, because it really just is garbage in, garbage out. If a human putting it in there doesn't put this information in right, then it's not in there right. So it's not like everybody's fingerprint is on file and all you have to do is run the fingerprint and it automatically tells you their entire life story. There's a lot of cracks that you can still fall through here.
What about that scene in Batman Dark Knight Rises where he takes the bullet that has been like shot through the wall and he pieces it back together and he finds the Joker's fingerprint on it, and from there he like figures out where the Joker is and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Will's not a big movie guy. He's not a big science fiction person. No. And I'm referencing right now a article written a couple years ago, or no, last year actually, by Kim Curry. And I can't remember where I got this from, but I think it might be the AJC. But he has actually a pretty good timeline with regard to the Georgia Assembly's movement on background checks in long-term care.
Yeah.
And it starts as early as April 12th of 1995 when the name-based law went into went into effect. That law requiring a name-based criminal record check of GCIC information for all nursing home employee applicants. The new law at that time did not require current employees to undergo a criminal record check. Through the Department of Community Health, Georgia law required owners and directors to have both state and national fingerprint checks, but not their employees. Then fast forward to 2010, so 15 years later, Georgia still required name-based background checks through GCIC on any employee or applicant for employment or nursing home, excluding persons employed by the nursing home prior to July 1, 1995. And then at that time, the CMS started to develop its own parameters for background checks. And then in July of 2012, Georgia received about $2.5 million from CMS federal grant money for the purposes of trying to develop a uniform background check system. June 1st of 2015, Georgia instituted the Georgia Voluntary Background Check Program, a pilot fingerprint-based background check program that only home health agencies and employees of private home care providers would initially be allowed to participate in. By August of 2015, Department of Community Health opened the pilot program up to long-term care providers. Once the program was fully functional, applicants for the employment with hospice, long-term acute care hospitals, and employees of nursing homes would also be able to participate. So it really is a long time coming, I feel like. But as Willis keeps saying, it's like it's only one piece of the puzzle to try to figure things out. Name base is still exceptional because you're going to be able to get, first of all, the ordinances that have been violated or other type of information where there was no fingerprint done, which can be quite often, as Will said. So it's just kind of an additional piece of the puzzle.
And it's also the whole system is problematic. I remember I would always have people ask me, like, hey, if I get a DUI in Georgia, does that affect my license in Tennessee? And the most accurate answer I could ever give them would be maybe. It just depends on if Georgia notifies Tennessee, And that's the problem with the system, is that you have these different. It's kind of like America intelligence pre 9/11, where we had the whole issue of the FBI not communicating to the CIA and the different branches of government hiding things from each other. That's what we have now. We have multiple different databases, multiple different ways in which information is input into those databases, and multiple different identifiers in those databases that correspond to an actual person. So the whole thing needs to have a better, coherent structure to it, so that there's just one database that everybody is a part of. And if you want employment in the healthcare field, you have to pass through that database, which is what they're trying to do now. But again, there are so many opportunities for missing something. So the most that a facility can do to protect itself is just do everything that it can, so that they can't be held responsible. Hey, look, we looked at the CNA database, we looked at the sex offender registry, we looked at the GCIC, we looked at the NCIC, we even called up the IAFIS and every other acronym that's out there. We called them all. It's not our fault that this nobody input into the system this person had been arrested for disorderly conduct that involved abusing somebody else.
Right.
Well,
talking about a national registry, the next thing is one world government.
One world government. That's what we need. One world government. One ring to rule them all.
What is that?
Lord of the Rings.
That's Lord of the Rings. One ring. You like Lord of the Rings?
And so that's what we need. Also, I guess now's the time of any podcast where I mentioned that I used to be a CNA.
If there was and I think I might have talked about this before, but if there is a nursing home abuse podcast drinking game, it most certainly is Will mentioning that he was a CNA.
Right. Well, I mean, it's every time we do these podcasts, it's a new subject matter, and it's always relevant. But the only time I did any sort of background check was when I went for employment the first time. I didn't take one for the actual school, and I think that's something that should change. It may have. I know a lot has changed for what it takes to be a certified nursing assistant now. I think it's like 70 clinical hours. Mine was not that many. Mine was a 2-week course, and that was it. But I think that even going into nursing school, and it may be the case that this is what happens, that you have to undergo background checks. I think if you're going to do anything in the healthcare field, and you're going to have access to patients, access to medications, access to that kind of privileged information, Social Security numbers, dates of birth, you should undergo frequent background checks. Because, one thing that happens a lot of times is that people enter a field that requires a background check. They pass the initial background check. Then something happens while they're practicing in that field, and it's never updated, or nobody catches it. So that's another problem.
I know that for lawyers in Georgia, we have to go through a comprehensive moral fitness qualification.
It's insane.
So they talk to your employers all the way back to, I think, 15 or 20 years. They're talking to references. Like, what else you got to do?
Well, and you have to be totally honest, because that's the one thing that people mess up on as lawyers, is that they would, I didn't mention this traffic ticket. Oh, well, now you're not going to sit for the bar. I think they should do something like that for healthcare too. I mean, it's the reason they do that for attorneys is that we have control over IOLTA accounts. We have access to personal information. We are in a fiduciary, in many ways, position, and that level of responsibility requires, I think, a thorough examination of somebody's background. Because again, it's not just, you want to know who's taking care of your elderly. It's not, or who has direct access. I don't want somebody opening up a nursing home that has a history of fraud and deceit, that has been arrested for other things similar to that in other states, right? It's not just physical abuse or sexual abuse, but that's a huge problem as well. I mean, we did the Bulldog investigation for WABS. Too many acronyms today. Yeah. Some local news station interviewed us about sexual abuse in nursing homes.
Yeah.
This is before the the law went into effect. It was earlier this year, and it was talking about this law, but it was there's nothing you can do for the residents.
Right.
So residents that have criminal backgrounds, residents that have sex offender registry backgrounds, there's nothing you can do there. It's just, at least at this point. So maybe that'll change in the future, and we'll see where this goes, because I mean, it hasn't even been enforced yet, because it's not until January of 2020 that they're going to start saying, okay, you've had enough time to implement it.
Right. Well, I think we kind of beat that one to death, or covered it substantially. Will, do you have any plans for Halloween?
No. Are you going to dress up as one of the Avengers?
Actually, this would be the first Halloween married Halloween. So we're considering. I don't know if you never liked G.I. Joe, but we are considering going together as two characters. I would be Destro, and she would be Baroness.
Okay.
So Destro was he had like a silver mask, but he basically essentially was a bald guy.
Yeah.
And I would be the bald guy. And then the Baroness is, I don't know, raven hair and big glasses.
And where would you be going?
Nowhere. We would just dress up for the kids that don't come to our place.
Yeah. Do any kids come over there?
No. I've never lived in a location ever in my life where kids actually visit. I'm either on a cul-de-sac in the middle of nowhere, in an apartment or a condo or a townhome where there are no children.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I grew up in the mountains, so.
So candy to you was if you found like a grub root,
right? Or
like, here's a carrot, I pull it up out of the ground.
Yeah. Or here's some sassafras bark.
Yeah. Oh, right.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, that's for real. I'm just making these things up.
Yeah.
You actually know the forest, the mountain candy. Well, at any rate, we appreciate you making it this far into the program. That's going to complete this episode of the Nursing Home Abuse Podcast. You can consume each and every episode as they come out, which is bi-monthly, every other week, on Monday mornings, on our YouTube channel, or at nursinghomeabusepodcast.com, or you can check us out wherever you get your podcasts from. And with that, we will see you next time.
See you next time. Thanks for tuning in to the Nursing Home Abuse Podcast. Nothing said in this podcast, either by the host or the guest, should be construed as legal advice, nor is intended to create an attorney-client relationship between the host or their guest and the listener. New episodes are available every Monday on Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, or on your favorite podcast app, as well as on YouTube and our website, nursinghomeabusepodcast.com. Again, that's nursinghomeabusepodcast.com. See you next time.